Okay, the meeting is live now.
Thank you.
No problem.
So before we begin, I would just like to mention to everybody that on Monday, I found that my audio was working much better if I had my video off. So if that develops today and I turn my video off, that'll be why that is. So I would,
Good afternoon, everyone.
good afternoon. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Committee of the Whole, the 2021 budget update for November 19th, 2020, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Good afternoon, everyone. Calling the roll, Ms. Baker,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schran, Ms. Conwell,
Present.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Stevens, Ms. Simon,
Here.
Mr. Brady. I see Mr. Brady, he's muted, but we do have a quorum.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And has anybody signed in for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we did receive public comment from a concerned citizen, and I have submitted the comments via email to you, and everyone else was on the distribution list, and I have added it to the meeting file.
Thank you very much. And the public comment is very brief, so I'm going to read it as follows. As a citizen of Cuyahoga County, I am asking the County Council to ask more questions and demand more transparency while reviewing the county's 2021 budget. We as citizens have the right to know and expect you to ask questions and get us real answers. This administration has allowed for the misuse of federal, state, and levy funds with various contracts and staff. Are you truly holding the administration and more specifically the fiscal office accountable? I have watched these meetings and have reviewed the fiscal agendas you approve, knowing that many of the narratives given are false. As the staff who do the work, maybe you can all start getting some real answers. Kind regards, a concerned citizen.
Mr. Chairman, do we have a name for our concerned citizen?
We do not.
I don't think it's appropriate to read something like that from someone who's not willing to even put their name on what they're writing.
I'd second that.
I third that, Simon. That was inappropriate.
Okay, understood. Okay. So next on our agenda is matters referred. Resolution 2020-239, the budget update. I would ask the clerk to please read the item into the record.
Resolution 2020-0239, adopting the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program annual update for 2021.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the third hearing on the budget update for calendar year 2021. Our plan for today's meeting is to do four things. First, we're going to get the administration's latest update regarding the use of CARES Act funds. Second, Director Parfiowicz will provide responses to some of the questions we put forward on Monday. Third, we will act on and discuss 2 technical amendments presented by the administration. And finally, we will discuss the budget resolution as a whole and decide on referral to the full council. So regarding the CARES Act funds actually do not get appropriated in this budget resolution, although they do affect the budget projections. The CARES Act appropriation will be in the fiscal agenda that is before the council next Tuesday. However, there has been so much activity and movement regarding CARES Act money that it is our responsibility to do continuous oversight. So I would like to ask Director Kotacik and/or Director Parfiowicz to give us the latest update. Please assume, for the sake of discussion, that about $15 million of the building retrofit money will not be spent for its original purpose. Please tell us what the administration's intent is by items and amounts as to how the remaining CARES Act money will be spent and how much remains for which a specific allocations has not yet been identified.
Good afternoon, everybody. Catherine Tkachuk here from the Innovation and Performance to talk about the CARES budget. I just pulled up, since there's a lot of numbers, I put together a couple of slides to just go over everything. So I'm going to share my screen. Just let me. Okay, so this is what, if you remember when I presented last week on the budget, we walked through sort of, we've been considering estimated spending as well as allocation throughout the CARES money, much like we would do with any other budget. So we had at that point, this was as of last week, about 112 million approved by council, almost 2 million in some direct charges. The 103 million is related to the funds, the public safety and everything that we've talked about in the past. And then there was that 2 million for the utility assistance program that was pending. But we also knew at that point that there was going to be some lower spending on things like the 30 million in building retrofit. We've been getting regular updates to try and make sure that we are trying to fully utilize these dollars. So I updated this chart as of today. And let me get to that going forward. See if I can get it to, there we go. So again, as of today, we have 113.5 million that was approved by council, but only about 96 million of that. So again, we got additional updates from Public Works regarding their spending as they, and some other departments. And so then we have about 2.5 million in direct charges that are going to be spent. This includes, for example, some dollars related to Board of Election support around costs for running the election during a pandemic. And again, the same 103 million in spending related to public safety and leave and all these other things we talked about. And so then there's about 14.5 million in programs, and I'm going to go over those in just a second, that are related to, or that are pending council approval still. You'll notice that this actually does take us above the 215 million that we have in CARES dollars. We are doing this again as we update and get information every day. We do have some additional programs that are potential if we find out that there's additional spending that would not be happening. So it's a moving target. We're continuing to update every time we get it. But for the 14.5 million that was asked about in what's pending, I will go through that. So there's a couple of different programs that are there. The gap funding for cities, that letter went out, I believe, yesterday to ask cities. We've set aside $3 million to identify for those projects or CARES costs that maybe they weren't able to cover in their budget. So we are getting that back, I believe, November 30th, and then we'll be able to address that. So we have money in there. There's additional money for hazard pay that has been requested, and so we have that in the budget as well. About 1.6 million in various nonprofits such as the Rape Crisis Center, the domestic violence that have COVID-related expenses. And I think we've talked about that a little bit as part of the budget. We are going to ask to go forward with a small business assistance program for round 3. Again, we did 2 rounds of those earlier in the year, but knowing that we have some additional funds, we want to support our small businesses. Some additional rapid response testing for public safety personnel. That's going to be about $1 million. We have in the budget an estimated about $400,000 for additional PPE purchases that will be going through in this year. Again, that's an estimate based on what they think they'll need going through December and purchase. And then there's a number of IT related expenses that are also in there for about $700,000 that cover the majority of what it is. A couple of them, there's, for example, one of them I believe is on Border Control Monday to go forward to ask for approval. But there are some IT expenses that are also in process looking for approval. So that's kind of where we are on this. So I would say there's not additional money not waiting to be allocated. We are working through each of these projects to get them approved and out the door so that we continue to spend all of this money to support our community and support the county's costs to respond to the pandemic. And we get regular updates, as I said, to try and make sure we keep track of this on a pretty much a daily basis to ensure that we're using all the money appropriately. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have as well.
So, Director, could you please send a copy of what you just presented to the clerk so that it can be circulated to all of us?
I will do that. Sure.
And Director, do you have any estimate as to how much unspent CARES Act money there remains for which a specific purpose has not yet been identified?
So we actually don't have any. If I go back one slide, you can see we're at with those $14.5 million in projects. That puts us at $216 million, which is above what our actual CARES budget is. We just are continuing to watch our spending and see if we find any, if we have any additional spending that comes in lower, then we'll look to address that as well. But as of this point, we do not have anything with those programs that I just addressed.
And so, Director, does that take into account that we had $15 million in building retrofit money that is not being spent for its original purpose?
It does, yes.
And are there any questions by my colleagues?
I have a question, Chair.
Ms. Baker?
Okay, so the 14.5 million that is no longer going to be used by Public Works for the county buildings, that 14.5 million now is being reverted to the list that you gave us, which was the gap funding, the hazard pay, nonprofit, small business, rapid response, PPE, and IT. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been tracking spending all along. So our dollars, yes. So those are the dollars that we have left, and that's where we would like to spend them.
And none of that has yet been approved?
Correct. Those are all pending approval.
Okay. And if I may, Chair, so the small business round 3, which is the largest piece of the additional funding that we didn't think, I don't think at the time, thought we were going to be spending. What was round 1 and 2? Was that also 4.3 million?
I believe that actually totaled about 2.3 million in small business. Let me look. Yes, so 2.35 million was done in the first rounds.
Combined?
Yes.
So this is a considerable, this is twice as much as the 2 rounds put together.
Yes, and I believe that was done. They did some surveys to try and identify maybe what the need was out there. But in development, I think we'll be able to talk to that. But yes, it is larger based on, I think, need that they identified.
Okay, I guess I would like to hear more about that. I mean, we certainly want to help our small businesses and they've been hit hard. But to allocate funds that we weren't going to use and put it into a new category and give them twice as much, I think deserves an explanation. Now the gap funding for the cities, we don't know whether or not they're going to take advantage of that. Some may, some may not, some may take more than others. So chances are that some of that gap funding might come back to us because they also receive funding for CARES. Any thoughts on, where any excess funding would go if we did have excess funding left?
We have received some other requests that we would then, I think, discuss with council and identify what the appropriate place to address that if we end up having additional funds that we need to spend. So we're continuing to work through that. It's a moving target. We want to make sure we spend all of these dollars in the community and with the county expenses. So we will do that as we find more information.
If I may ask about the nonprofits, that's all I put was nonprofit. Can you expand upon what 1.6 million more is going to be spent on nonprofit that we haven't already approved?
Yes, so many of these were ones we discussed as part of the discussion around the budget. So for example, Providence House, there's May Dugan Center, the Journey Center for Safety and Healing, YWCA, Jewish Family Service Association of Cleveland, Legal Aid, Rape Crisis Center, Canopy Child Advocacy Center, Frontline, and Ohio Guidestone. So I think we discussed this as part of the larger budget discussion. They're the same ones that are also going to be, I think, receiving some additional levy dollars. I don't, Walter, if I'm right on that.
That's correct.
Yeah,
Some are getting
and that's where we are.
I think from memory on the HHS levy, we were giving 40,000 each for nonprofits that would be directed and used by the CARE funding. So how does this 1.6 million play into, is that the same list that we're giving more CARES money to now, or is there an additional nonprofits that we're including? What are the specifics there?
So this is, I believe, so this is money in addition to the 40,000 from the levy funds. And some, I think most of them are the same, but there were some that we funded solely through CARES because that's what they had the expenses available to fund.
So can you tell me how much more each one of them will be receiving on top of the 40,000, I believe? I mean, I don't have that in front of me, but 1.6 million is a considerable amount of money to give on top of the money we've already given. How is that being rationed out?
Sure. I mean, I can go through the list or send this to you. Providence House, it's 122,000. May Dugan, 164,000. The Journey Center, 116,000. YWCA, 100,000. Jewish Family Service Association, 33,000. Legal Aid is about 144,000. Rape Crisis Center at 300,000. Canopy Child Advocacy Center, 99,000. Frontline is 132,000, and as well as Guidestone at 132.
Now, are those all in addition to what we already said we were going to give them, or is that a larger amount given to each one? What is that 1.6 million? Is like the Rape Crisis Center. Were they going to always get a certain amount of money, and then this is going to be on top of that equals 300,000, or where
this is their, oh, sorry. This is their funding that was related to, they had costs for related to COVID. So they either had increased costs because of COVID or business interruption costs. So that was their funding that was related to that. I don't have the breakdown of the levy funds in front of me to share what dollars, but those that are getting the 40,000 would be in addition to these dollars.
Okay, so if they had more, I thought that the exercise we went through was that 40,000 was, I don't remember now, I'll tell you honestly, that was the max of what they needed or could qualify for, but maybe not. Walter, do you have anything? I mean, how did we come up with 40,000 to begin with for all of them? Is that just what we could afford at the time?
That is, I believe, what we could afford at the time, and we issued the 40,000 to 7 of the not-for-profits. I have a list here. It's Cleveland Adoption Network at $40,000, Renee Jones at 40,000, YWCA, I guess they're all at 40,000, Juvenile Court Witness Victims, Domestic Violence, East Cleveland Domestic Violence, and Canopy Child Advocacy. Those seven agencies receive 40,000 apiece for a total of $280,000.
Okay, so those seven that you just listed, are they also part of the 1.6 million now, or is this, I didn't hear the same list. I mean,
I can share with you my list. I have a list that has a column for the 40,000s from the levy and also the CARES Act funds. The majority of those receiving CARES Act fund are not receiving HHS levy funds.
okay, and how does the 1.6 million play into the list that we already knew, including the 40,000 each and the HHS levy? How does that 1.6 fold in? Or is that a whole new list? Or
It's
is
just-
that, yeah,
It's a separate list. I would consider it a separate list. I
separate
mean,
list?
yeah, the CARES Act money has to be spent by December 31st of this year, where the levy dollars, these are being appropriated for next year for 2021.
Right, but some, if I remember, and I'm sorry to take up so much time, they don't have the numbers in front of me here. The dollars that were from the CARES Act, and the 40,000 is CARES Act money, right?
Oh, no, the $40,000 is HHS levy dollars.
So the other dollars that were given from the CARES Act, are any of those part of what we're giving today?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Trevor. If I may jump in, just to
Yeah.
maybe help clarify.
Yeah,
Yes,
In-
please proceed.
Councilwoman Baker, we do have a nice side-by-side chart
yes,
that would show all the agencies that Catherine and Director P have presented today. And it will show you exactly which agency is getting HHS levy money and which agency is getting CARES money. I think there are a couple that are getting both.
right?
But we can send you that after this. And we did go, it's that same chart that we went over last Thursday.
Right.
And I think it's just a good kind of summary, because I think we keep talking about levy money that's you're going to be asked to approve for the 21 budget update, and then CARES money that we have to spend this year. But I think what the administration did, rightfully so, when they got all these requests from the nonprofits, said, hey, we lost all this VOCA funding. Can the county assist us at least in part of a transition why we lost this money? And what the administration did said, okay, well, can you present what CARES eligible expenses you have, which they did. And then if there were expenses that was not covered by CARES eligible expenses, they capped out the levy dollars at 40,000. Even the request by all these agencies were greater than 40, but naturally, I mean, we couldn't afford to make up for, lost federal fundings. So we capped at each request at 40,000. So I think if I send you that side-by-side comparison, you can just see the list of what agency is getting from what funding source.
Can you, to help me out, can you make a third column that says what the extra 14.5 million now will be inserted in there for these nonprofits that
Yeah,
weren't in that list to begin with?
Yeah, Nan, and I think Catherine has a nice, I think it was the next slide that
Okay,
showed that 14 million. So that's what close gets you to $15 million. So that's the extra, that's the 15 million number, rounding up, of course, but that's what makes up that 15 number.
yeah, I understand that. I'm just asking that, for example, with the nonprofits of 1.6 million, we had nonprofits getting CARES money before. So now we've got another bullet for nonprofits for 1.6. So the third column would show either that nonprofit agency getting 400,000 or 500,000 more than what we thought they were going to get. Maybe there's a new nonprofit in there that's going to get CARES money that didn't get it before. I guess
Yeah,
I'll
I'll show you that, Nan. I can do that. Yeah, and I think there's just a little misunderstanding, and we could talk offline, I think, to help you understand what's going on with that lost VOCA funding that falls under that nonprofit status.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there other questions from my colleagues regarding the CARES Act funding?
Councilman Miller, I just would,
Trustee
Chair
Rowe.
Conwell, would just like to ask if we're going to get a breakdown of these items that are pending approval, like who exactly the hazard pay will go to and the small business. I'm sure the Department of Development will speak to that when they get on, but just interested in some breakdowns of that.
Yes, I can get you those and we can get that detail over to you.
Thank you.
And also to my colleagues, when we have the meeting on November 30th and we review the ERP and the Harris system, we're also going to get another quick update on the CARES Act money. I think it would be a good thing to just continuously monitor this process through the end of the year.
If I may follow on the list, the rapid response training for public safety personnel, 1 million. If you can elaborate on that too, when we get to that point, what exactly are we doing? Who are we testing and where is it going to be tested? And why do we need an extra million when we didn't figure that in before? So just a little expanding on that too.
Okay, we will get you that information.
Any other questions from my colleagues regarding the CARES Act funding? Okay, thank you very much for the update. The next item is that at Monday's meeting, a number of questions from council members were brought forward. And we realized that some of these are questions that that could be answered in a couple of days, and other questions are things that take more time to research and put information together. But I would like to ask Director Parfiowicz if there are some of the council questions from Monday that you can provide us updates on.
Well, there are, Councilman Miller, I can share my screen and go over the ones that I have responses to.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, just starting at the top, the first question was for me to basically provide a breakdown of the HHS levy, the additional $35 million when the levy was approved as it was budgeted to where it is now. I did forward that to Andrea, Trevor, Councilman Miller, Councilwoman Baker. I could display that again if you would like, or I could move on to the next question.
Okay, so you could display it for a moment to
Okay.
remind everybody of it, and then you can continue.
Just a second. This was the original allocation of the 35 million when the levy was in the approval process. I think most of you will recall seeing this document. Why does it keep moving around? Allocates the 3.9 mil and the 0.8 mil increase for a total of 4.7 mil. This broke it down by agency and what the service was. And then I followed up with this update. The column B there is the original budget from the sheet you saw just previously. Column C is the revised or what's being proposed now. And column D is the increase or the decrease.
Okay, thank you very much. Please continue.
Okay. Okay, the next question was for David Merriman. about a lead paint coalition presentation. He is in the process of coordinating that and should be back to everyone shortly. The next question was for Kevin Gowan about sharing data points on wait times for calls at the height of the pandemic. You can see the response there in red. In response to the pandemic, the USDA, they waived several of the requirements for SNAP and relieved a lot of the administrative burden for the County Department of Job and Family Services. And I'll show you the graph down below, and I think it will really tell the story. The graph summarizes calls answered, calls abandoned, and then the average speed of the answer. So you can see that after the pandemic started in the month of April, all the numbers improved greatly. And slowly but surely, with the increased needs, they're starting to ramp back up again. And I guess what's being reported now is that October presented the highest number of calls that they've received, as the administrative burden had doubled again because those waivers are now gone. Kevin also makes a note here that some of the application sources, the data available on the sources is not reliable, doesn't reconcile with formal application reporting data that he has. So he's reaching out to the state trying to reconcile some of that. But these are truly his statistics here. And I think all of you heard that during the pandemic time when Kevin sent most of his staff home and operated the call center remotely, that all the statistics improved greatly. And clearly that's what these graphs show. The next question was for Tracy Mason to detail the next 10 years and how they'll look when it comes to seniors and the increases to Cuyahoga County. She cited some United States Census statistics here. For the first time US history, older adults are projected to outnumber children by 2035. It mentions a chart, but one wasn't provided from what I received. Second bullet again, Census Bureau within Ohio, people over age 60 will also outnumber those under 20. And then the third bullet also has some information for the Center for Community Solutions, that there are over 300,000 older adults living in Cuyahoga County. And then by the year 2030, 30.1% of Cuyahoga County's older adults over age 65 will outnumber the children and teens under age 20. I will follow up with Tracy to find out where the data charts are that depict these numbers and share those as well.
Walter, if they didn't make the attachment, I'll resend them to you now.
Okay. The next question was for Rebecca Dorman, and it's about the number of slots, the 4,600 versus the 40,000. You can read Rebecca's response there, but from what I gather, the 4,000 is the minimum, where she's been seeing numbers pre-pandemic as high as 4,283 seats occupied. So not quite 4,600, but she's right there in the middle of it. The second question was, in addition to the 4,000 high quality pre-K slots, how many preschool children are in decent quality preschool programs? What's reported in her response is that she has notations in here of about 8,000. That's in addition to the 4,000 UPK slots. I think you'll see it down here a little bit further. Total number of preschool age children in high quality settings is detailed below. These numbers do not include UPK sites. Therefore, roughly speaking, about 8,000 preschool age children were in high quality non-UPK sites pre-pandemic. So the 8,000 is in addition to her 4,000 number. The next question was for Jackie McCray, but then it was further sent on to David. It's down below. The next question was for me about providing amendments to the budget for the council ahead of time. So I do have the amendments. Councilwoman Miller, I will hold on those until we're done here. Or do you want me to go through those now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Soon.
Okay. The next question was for David about the 1.5 million used for emergency childcare support. The question truly was, does it mean the existing childcare room will not be utilized? The answer is no. There will always be a need for the childcare room. There's a lot of reasons to have it in the building, and he cited some examples: children brought in by police, a child who's waiting for after a family visit, post-COVID, a child whose parent is meeting with agency staff, a child who has entered the agency custody and is waiting for medical triage. The next question, I believe, was about the staff. I believe it's 4 staff that are supposed to exist in the child care room. How are their hours utilized? David states the kids are in the child care room for the same reasons listed in the first question. There are no kids in the room. When there's no kids in the room, they help with other functions. Yeah, this is true. They help with the Giving Tree and a lot of the outreach type work that goes on at Children and Family Services. The next question was deciding on the emergency child care support. And some clarity, is it an outside agency or does this mean hiring more staff? I think it's pretty clear from David's response that this is a contracted service that he's RFPing for. We're always in need for these services. It's a tough business there. Kids staying in the child care room for days and time due to trouble finding enough placements to meet their individual needs. It's always a problem there. Some kids have some very, very hard problems to deal with.
Although I do want to just add on that point, we do not have kids staying in the building for days at this point. I think we've gone 90 days without having any child spend time in the building in lieu of a placement. We have had, I believe it's 1 child who we were waiting on a COVID test to move into placement.
The next question again was for David. When all providers were convened, was Robin Martin included? The response here is that she's been involved in the entire process along the way. I think she may have missed a meeting due to social distancing issues, but Robin's been involved in the process. And David, I know David values Robin's input in these situations. And that's the end of the questions. So the remaining couple of items we'll be getting back to you on, especially the lead coalition.
So thank you very much, Director, for those responses and for a considerable effort taken to put some information together in a short time. I would ask if my colleagues have any follow-up questions about the responses from the administration.
Councilman Miller.
Ms. Conwell.
To the chair, to Walter or David, I'm not clear when we talk about the emergency child care center. Well, I personally have been envisioning a building. So me and Levine tried to talk about this yesterday, but I just want to be clear. Is it something, are you looking for contracts in similar to the ones that we have with Safi and Providence House, or are we looking for a specific building, or are we looking for people that will take these children in their home, those kind of contracts? Can you be a little clear on that?
Yes, I would say it could be multiple components. I think we have to recognize that one, Providence House has really shown that this partnership model can really work when you have a provider that steps up and does not turn children away. So long as they have been open, they have been exceptionally responsive, and it's been a very high quality relationship. The issue is they don't take older children, let alone teens. I think you're muted, Councilwoman, if that was to me, if you were asking a question. So I would say this, yes, having a building, having a lead provider would be a great resource. But we also recognize there are some of the children that we want to place, the teens, they do better in single home settings. Some of what we need are more emergency childcare foster homes. That's one of the ideas that has been pitched to us by our providers, that if they get foster parents that say, hey, listen, I'm not going to take a child for more than 30 days because, I'm going to open my home up to a sort of a transition of children as opposed to long-term placements. That could also meet our needs. So we are open to both ideas. The emergency child care center is designed more for the Providence house-like model, but we're not going to stop exploring the creation of additional foster homes as well.
Thank you.
The problem there is having enough providers to actually serve all of our children. I mean, some of the kids that have the greatest needs, they go underserved and wind up being in the buildings for extended periods of time. It just breaks your heart.
There are also special needs children that do not do well in residential centers. And I would tell you, I've watched the DCFS staff care for children with autism, care for children with other developmental disabilities. Some of them will not do well when placed within a congregate setting unless it is really designed around their needs. And so that's also the reason that we need some very special resources as well.
Any other questions by my colleagues regarding the administration responses?
If I may, I have just a couple. On the UPK, I understand the private sector, and then of course the UPK. How many UPK qualified students are not being served? How many more do we have that we could be serving and can't, that aren't in any preschool, I guess, if they're not in the private sector? Do we know that number? And if you don't, you can get it to me.
I don't have it. David, would you have it?
I would want to be accurate. Let me get that number from Rebecca Dorman. I want to make sure that I'm getting the question right. Could you please repeat it?
Only that we know that there's limited capacity for the UPK program, even with the 5 million that now the HHS levy is paying for. So there are some, I believe, on a waiting list, or is there a waiting list? How many children don't make the cut to qualify, that do qualify, but there just isn't room for them, especially as I think we heard the class sizes are reduced.
Yeah.
So
and I would say that there's 2 points there. First, I would recognize that UPK for us means high quality universal pre-kindergarten. It's not just universal pre-kindergarten. So I'm going to answer that by how many, what's the unmet need for high quality universal pre-kindergarten slots?
Right.
Yeah. The second part is I want to confirm right now with COVID, there are many people that are not sending their children to childcare,
right.
and so the need there is somewhat variable. So I'll ask Rebecca for feedback on that as well.
Yeah, and I understand the current environment, but I guess I'm looking more for the future.
Got it.
In a hopefully next year environment, which hopefully will be better. Where are we in that picture?
Okay.
And then, I don't want to, if we could go back to that first slide on the 35 million HHS dollars that you showed, Walter.
Sure. Just a moment. Let me just get back to it. Yes, this one?
No, the next one.
Next one. Yes.
Maybe that is it. Okay. So I guess the question was, where in that list did we have to cut back and not provide the services we thought we were going to provide with the HHS levy funding that got shifted to other things that we didn't know at the time needed our services? I mean, I know there's a diversion center for 2.5 million
Yeah, that's part of it, yes.
Yeah, that was, so where did we take out of that equals 2.5 million to allow that to be part now of the HHS levy? That was the question, I guess.
The diversion center, we were no longer going to use levy dollars for because we shifted that to the opioid fund. So that freed up that $2.5 million. You'll see the positive numbers there are the ones that were in addition to the original budget, and the red negative numbers were the areas where dollars were taken to fund some of these other areas, like Say Yes to Education, the drop-in center, the child care center, the Office of Reentry, the Equity Commission, the Lead Coalition. You see the $40,000. They're all listed for the 7 entities receiving lost VOCA dollars.
I see. So, okay. So that diversion center dollars, we used the opiate dollars for that.
Correct.
That's how we made up for that. Okay. And took it, I
Took it
see.
out of the levy budget and we charged it to the opioid budget.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'll look at that a little closer, but that certainly does help in how it is that we were able to swap some of these dollars in and out. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by my colleagues regarding the administration responses? Okay, hearing none, we're going to continue on, and the next thing we have to deal with is that we received a couple of technical amendments from the administration. And so before we start with the amending, I would like, for purposes of discussion, to ask if we can get a motion and a second to refer this resolution to the full council on second reading. Would somebody be willing to make a motion to?
Dan Brady.
Motion. Second, Conwell.
Okay, so to Miss Andrea, who did we have as the first and the second?
Okay.
It's Brady first and Conwell second.
I was just going to say Brady was first and Ms. Conwell was second.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have 2 amendments, and I would ask Director Parfiowitz to present them one at a time, and we will vote on them individually.
Councilman Miller, I'd again like to share my screen.
Please proceed.
Okay, I have 2 proposed budget amendments. The first budget amendment is for the Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. Accounting unit is PJ 280100, and the council reporting line is other expenditures. The amendment requested is to reduce the budget by $181,177. This is basically a result of an error. We had decreased projected revenues requiring an increase to the general fund subsidy, but in reality, what was included in the recommended budget was both an increase to the general fund subsidy and an increase to the other expenditures budget line. The other increase in the other expenditures budget line is not necessary. So in essence, this basically removes that one item.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions about this technical amendment? Hearing none, may I have a motion and a second to incorporate this amendment into the resolution?
So move, Brown.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Conwell.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? So hearing none, all those in favor of the public safety technical amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it and the amendment is approved. And I would call on Director Parfiowitz for the second amendment.
The second amendment is, it's not truly a budget amendment. It's an amendment to add a reserve on our cash balance. It's basically a reporting item on our summary schedule. The amendment is for $450,000 and it's basically adding a reserve to the general fund cash balance for ERP operations. It includes ERP staff training, knowledge transfer, retraining, and issue resolution consulting. These were the items that were reported to me, and I believe Jack Ryan also may have shared this with council members previously. The request that was submitted to me was to put a reserve.
Yes, thank you very much, Jack Ryan. Okay, so yes, Jack Ryan has shared that with council members, and I would ask my colleagues if there are any questions about this amendment.
So Chair, just so I understand the conversation from yesterday, the reserve on cash balance is there in case we should need it. But there could be circumstances where we may not.
Yes, I can respond to that. Historically, the IT budget has typically generated significant surpluses over the course of the year as there's vacancies and some contracts are not fully utilized. And the $450,000 is relatively modest compared to the whole budget for IT. And so there's a pretty good chance that that there will be surpluses available and it will not be necessary to appropriate additional money. But if there is such a need, well, then the reserve on balance is noted and is set aside.
Got it. That's what I remember. Thank you.
Any further questions about the IT technical amendment? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, the ayes have it, and the second technical amendment is incorporated as part of the resolution. I would like to bring to everybody's attention that Judge Tom O'Malley from the juvenile court, the administrative judge, brought to our attention very late that he believes that there is a significant shortfall in the amount of money appropriated for the juvenile court. And we take that very seriously, but we don't have enough information about the problem to deal with it today. So what I'm going to suggest is that we pass the resolution out as is today, but that we continue to work on this issue over the next couple of days. And if we determine that an additional amendment is necessary, we can add that amendment to the resolution on Tuesday when we get to second reading. So with that, I would like to invite any discussion or comment on the budget update resolution from my colleagues before we vote on the resolution. So hearing none so far, I'd like to say a few things. That first of all, I would like to thank Executive Budish, Director Parfiowitz and Chambers, and all the OBM staff and the directors, Council President Brady, all of my colleagues and the council staff for all of their help and assistance in preparing the budget update. The passage of the Health and Human Services levy was truly historic for Cuyahoga County and is reflected in the budget. There are very important, significant additions, including the money for the Adams Board, the additional senior services programs, particularly the options program and the senior centers, the emergency children's care center, the drop-in center, funding for lead-based paint, and for the Equity Commission and reentry services and FCFC, and there are some others. So it is a very positive putting together of Health and Human Services priorities that are very important for our county's future. So with that, we have a motion for adoption, and it has been amended twice. So the vote that we're going to take is going to be on sending the resolution to the full council as amended for the November 24th council meeting. Before calling for the vote, I would ask one more time if my colleagues have any further comments or questions.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. It's Sunny.
Simon.
I'm a bit confused about the juvenile court situation. I thought the hazard pay was allocated to assist with the juvenile court's needs. And now I'm hearing that you're saying there's some lateness involved. And can you be more specific about this?
To Ms. Simon, this problem only came to my attention about an hour ago. And I learned that that Judge O'Malley is very concerned that he thinks that there's a significant error in his budget. And I don't even think that it has anything to do with hazard pay. I think it's some kind of an accounting discrepancy that has to be worked out with OBM. So at this point, this is as much as I know.
It is not
yes,
related to the hazard pay.
Councilwoman Simon, we're going to take up the money has been set aside for hazard pay, and we're going to take that up in emergency session with lots of other items, unfortunately, next Tuesday. And so I don't know what this is about either, but it's not about the hazard pay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question and clarification. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of referring Resolution 2020-239, the 2021 budget update to the full council for second reading, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Okay, the ayes have it, and the resolution is so recommended.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Stevens.
No, this is Andrea.
Andrea.
Right. I would like to go back to the second technical item for IT to clarify the vote. I heard that there were no opposing, but I did not hear a motion to approve. I'm sorry, motion to move and also a second. So can we clarify that, please?
Okay, so let's go back to the second technical amendment, which is the IT amendment. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Conwell.
And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed say no. The ayes have it and the amendment is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any miscellaneous business? Hearing none. And there being no further business that commands our attention, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much, everyone, for your time.